You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 116. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Paula here, and I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining me. We are talking today about the link between confidence and time management. These are two topics that I often coach lawyers on in my practice, and it's the first time I'm talking about each of them, so time management and confidence, and how they relate to each other. It's a theme that I've been noticing recently in my work, and so I thought it would be a really great topic for discussion. And I hope that as you're listening, you can resonate with what it is that I'm saying and that you can see opportunities in the way that you manage your practice, in the way that you see yourself, that will have an impact on how you feel in terms of your own confidence levels, and also in terms of how your confidence levels will impact the way that you manage your time. So what we are going to do is go through a number of examples of how I see confidence impacting time management in lawyer practices. And I'm also going to offer you some strategies to help solve the challenges that we are going to be talking about. And I know that's a little bit vague, so I'm going to get more specific. Now, before I dive in, I just wanted to create this vision, this image in your mind's eye of how you perceive a confident person. When I think of a confident person, I often go first to the physical confidence, how they show up. Confident people tend to take up physical space. They have a physical presence. They stand tall, they speak with authority, and they also have a presence when it comes to time. So you may notice, if you think about some of the most confident people that you know, think about how they move, how they speak. They tend not to rush when they're speaking. They tend not to seem to be in a hurry. They seem to have a sense of calm about how they choose to spend their time. And often what you'll find is they seem to spend less time doing the things that they do not want to do. They don't spend very much time ruminating over conversations they've had or second guessing decisions that they've made. And so what we're looking at today is really the relationship between confidence and time management. And I'm going to offer suggestions for how you can increase your confidence and therefore save time and make better use of your time. So I mentioned there were some common challenges that I see. Challenges that arise from a connection or a lack of confidence and how it can come out in your time management. And I've got 5 different examples I'm going to share with you. The first is overscheduling. Now, if this applies to you, you may feel like your calendar controls you and not the other way around. You may even feel like other people own your time. You might feel like you're always in a rush, and when you look at your calendar, you might find that it is full of commitments that you wish that you had said no to. Now, as we're talking, as you're listening to this episode, I'd invite you to think back to last weekend, maybe the weekend before that, and maybe look forward and think about the number of commitments that you've said yes to that are not a full 120% yes, right? These are the things that you agreed to for one reason or another, and it was not that really enthusiastic, hell yes threshold that you would like to have when it comes to deciding what fits onto your calendar. Now, there are a number of reasons why there can be this slippage, why you might find activities and commitments on your calendar that you're not 100% crazy about. Number 1 is FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. And that is one of those fears that if you don't say yes to something, that you're going to miss out on an opportunity. Now, this is a really interesting question, right? What I have asked clients to identify what their priorities are. what they choose to put first, most people don't have much trouble when it comes to identifying what it is that they want. But when you ask somebody what they're willing to let go in order to make room for the things that they want, then it becomes really problematic. That's where the fear of missing out sets in. You might think about items that you have in your closet, clothing items that you've bought and never worn, and yet you don't want to give them away because there's a chance that it might come in handy at some point in the future. So FOMO is a big challenge when it comes to overscheduling. Another challenge in terms of overscheduling is you don't want to disappoint people, and so you don't set boundaries. You don't say no to people because you don't want to hurt their feelings. You may have a hard time letting go. I just alluded to that a moment ago, driven by scarcity, and that will impact your ability to honor the priorities that you have set for yourself. And finally, you may find that your calendar is overcommitted, or you have overcommitted yourself because in a sense, you're trying to prove yourself through your productivity. The more that you do, the more you feel good about yourself. You're deriving confidence from the busyness in your calendar. So in addition to overscheduling, what I've also noticed is procrastination. Now, this is a big challenge for many lawyers. It can have a number of sources. One of those sources is a lack of confidence. And what you might find is that you are putting things off. So it might be big goals that require you to take risks. Maybe they're career goals, maybe they're big goals in relation to some other aspect of your life, but these are the big decisions. Do you leave your job and take a new one? Do you aspire to a leadership position? These are large decisions and you may put them off because of feelings of self-doubt and insecurity. There are other things that you might put off, smaller tasks, writing that memo, sending that email, making that phone call, where you are putting those tasks off, and it can be related to self-doubt or lack of confidence. Now, you might also find that procrastination can result in not only that initial loss of time, the time that you spend putting the task off, but also it can create back-end problems. And you've probably seen this before when a client gives you a file and they give it to you at the very last minute. The filing deadline is tomorrow. And so you have to scramble to get things done. And what ends up happening is you don't do a perfect job. You can't do a perfect job because you didn't have enough time or information. And so on the other side of it, you end up doing more work to fix the initial problem, to fix the initial filing than you would have required if you'd been able to do it in advance, well in advance with the adequate amount of time. And so procrastination, of course, costs you time, not only in the putting off, but also in the follow-up. Now, the third area where I see this is that tasks take longer. Actually doing your work can take longer as a result of lacking confidence. So what you might find is that you're slower to make decisions because you're concerned about making the wrong decision. You have fear around that. You may feel like you're driven by perfectionism at the back end. So you have the task, you've written the brief, but you can't get out of the editing stage. You don't want to send it off. You don't want to send off that contract. You don't want to do the final step that is required in order to finish the task. It may also be that you're in the task, and even though you've done the research, even though you have formulated your opinion, again, you are second guessing yourself, you're doubting, and you keep looking outside of yourself to see if there is a right answer, when sometimes there simply is not a clear answer. A fourth area is rumination and second guessing. So again, you may make a decision, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's on a file, whether it's a conversation you're having at work. You may make a decision, and then after you've made that decision, you start to second guess yourself. You start to waffle. And that again can take up time that you are not using to do things that are more productive. You may also find that your mental space is occupied when you are ruminating, when you're going over a conversation that you had the other day with a colleague or a client and you're replaying every moment, you're not moving forward into the future. So these are all examples of how confidence and time management are related. Overscheduling, procrastination, tasks taking longer, rumination and second guessing, and then finally, wasted time. Now, the whole concept of whether or not you can waste time, I would volunteer, is up for grabs. You can decide whether or not you want to believe that it's even possible to waste time. That is a philosophical question. But let's say you feel like you are wasting time. There are a number of reasons for that. Number one, you may tie your self-confidence to being busy and productive. So when you're not being busy and productive, you may feel guilty. You may then find that you go to rest, you try to take some time off, and instead of allowing yourself to rest and enjoy yourself, you feel anxious. And you end up feeling tired and resentful because you're unable to take that rest. You keep working, you keep trying to be productive. And ironically, what ends up happening is you end up wasting time. You waste your downtime because when you're trying to have your downtime, you're busy thinking about what you should be doing, feeling guilty, feeling anxious. And when you're engaged in your task-oriented work, you may be exhausted because you haven't given yourself that downtime. And so it's taking you longer to do your tasks. So I've gone through this list of challenges that present when our time management is affected by our levels of confidence. And as I went through that list, and as I go through today's podcast episode, I invite you to think about which of these areas resonate with you and how you might decide to move forward. So when you start looking at these time management problems, and these are classic time management problems, when you look at them specifically through the lens of confidence, there is a common thread among them that is linked to confidence and self-trust. Now, what you will find is that if you think about that link, confidence and self-trust will affect what gets on your schedule in the first place and can lead to overscheduling and overcommitting yourself. It may affect your ability to trust your own judgment. You may feel like there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. You might feel like your time belongs to somebody else and you should be spending it a certain way. Query about who it is that gets to decide how we spend our time. You may worry about missing out or disappointing people, and then you end up doing things that you do not want to do. And you feel like you're not deserving of rest. So these are all rooted at a central level in your confidence levels. Now, what many people try to do is to create better systems. I've had various podcast episodes where I talk about time management systems. I talk about time management tips for lawyers, the relationship between time management and your executive functioning skills. I've got multiple episodes about procrastination, priorities, boundaries. There are a number of tools and strategies that you can use in order to manage your time better. These are all helpful time management strategies and tools that may be of service to you. However, as long as you experience feelings of self-doubt and lack of confidence at your core, you will continue to unconsciously take the same self-defeating actions. What that might look like is you might be letting your inner drill sergeant run the show, aka the inner critic. We've all heard about the inner critic. The inner critic really wants to pile your calendar up and get you really busy and proving just how amazing you really are. They're not concerned about your sustainability. They're not concerned about having space on your calendar. And so if the inner critic is driving the show, it doesn't matter how many systems you have in place. They are just going to continue to increase the volume. You may find that you are trying to prove yourself by doing things faster and more efficiently. But what that can lead to, of course, is another problem altogether, which would be burnout. And finally, what you might find is that you are continually deferring gratification until some day in the future. And the trouble with that is that you'll continue to defer gratification until, well, we don't know when. And so the idea here is really to think about your confidence levels, any self-doubt that you're having, fears, anxieties, and to think about them in relation to how it is that you are scheduling your days. What can happen is if you're using these different time management strategies that I referred to earlier, yes, these systems and strategies are great tools, but if at the root of the problem is a lack of confidence, they are only Band-Aid solutions that will offer temporary relief. What ends up happening is you still end up doing things that you don't want to do and not doing the things that you want to do. You still end up overcommitting, and then you're in that awkward position of apologizing for being late or slow or disorganized, etc. And you constantly feel like you're disappointing everybody around you, including yourself. You may find that you continue to procrastinate, that you are increasingly ruminating over decisions or second guessing yourself. And maybe you struggle with making decisions in the first place. And finally, you continue to waste your time. So what I'm offering in today's podcast episode is to look at time management from a completely different perspective. Instead of focusing on the practical how-to strategies of managing your time, what I'm offering is to build up your self-confidence. And by building up your self-confidence, that will have the domino effect. It'll have a cascading effect of allowing you to make decisions, micro decisions along the way that will in turn help you manage your time better. So I've got 5 different suggestions to help you do that. And the first of those suggestions is to, first of all, gain awareness of the impact that your level of confidence is having on your time. Now, I should pause here and note that not everybody is going to struggle with their self-confidence and their time management. And again, going back to the example that I asked you to think of at the very beginning of this episode, you may know people who are really confident, who do a great job of managing their time and seeming on top of it and calm and collected and committed to the things that they want to do, not the things that they do not want to do. You may fall into this category, in which case this is an opportunity for you to further reflect and refine the way that you manage your time, knowing that you have the confidence to do that. Now, if you are maybe in the middle zone, you will start to notice some of these patterns, some of these opportunities where you can improve your time management by improving the level of confidence that you have in yourself. And it may be that if this is more of a challenge for you, you'll start to see some places where you can just get started, right? And so wherever it is that you fall on the spectrum, I would invite you to think about where you are in relation to what we're discussing today, how what we're talking about today can be helpful for you, and what action steps you might take going forward that will help you improve your confidence and save your time and use your time in a way that aligns with what you truly want. So going back to the question of awareness, the first thing that I invite you to do is to consider the impact of your confidence levels on your time management skills. So I went through a list of different examples: overscheduling, procrastination, second guessing, ruminating, and of all the different scenarios that I described, which of those resonates the most strongly with you? Another way to ask yourself this is, where is your shakiest spot? I went to a class the other day. It was a fitness class. And part of it was trying to train your muscles through slow movement. And the instructor kept saying, where is your shakiest spot? So what I'd invite you to consider is, where is the shakiest spot? When you look at that list, where do you resonate the most strongly? Now, another area that I should also ask you to explore is, where are you strong? I always encourage my clients to examine where it is that they're already strong and then build on their strengths. So you might find, for example, that you are really good at saying no. Maybe that is one of the strategies where you have a lot of confidence that you're able to do it. You do it well. You might look at that as an example and try to get to the bottom of what is supporting that level of confidence for you. And conversely, when you look at areas where you don't feel as strong, where you feel like you've got that shakier spot, what is going on there? And so I'd invite you, again, think about where your time management is breaking down. Is it overcommitting? In that case, maybe what you'll notice is that your calendar is full. Maybe there's social engagements that you're not particularly keen to go to. Maybe there are projects that you're doing with your organization that you're not 100% committed to. Maybe you're on more boards than you want to be on. Maybe you're doing volunteer activities at your children's school that you're not particularly keen on. So just ask yourself, where is the shakiest spot? And from there, we're going to move on to the next step, step 2, which is to understand how confidence relates to this particular challenge. So if you are scared to say no to something, ask yourself, what is it that you are afraid of? If you're scared to make a decision, for example, what is it that is holding you back? What is causing you to feel that way? What you might find is that there's a fear of making a wrong decision. And if you were to make that wrong decision, you might be judged by your client. You might be judged by your colleagues. You might get in trouble with a judge. Ask yourself, where is it? What is it that is holding you back? If it's procrastination, maybe the challenge there is that you're fearful that you're not going to be able to produce a product that aligns with the expectations that you have with yourself. So that next step really is just to understand what is going on there. Yes, you see that there's a challenge here. I'm overcommitting. I'm procrastinating. I'm second guessing decisions. You can identify the challenges and then ask yourself, get curious in that second step and ask yourself how this can relate to your levels of self-confidence. Now, the third step, and this is key, is to treat yourself with the utmost kindness. What we do not want to do is to look at your calendar and say that it's overcommitted and to look at how you're procrastinating and second guessing your decisions and then feeling badly about that, having judgment about any of those things. No, not at all. Chances are, if those are the thoughts that you're jumping to initially, those may be some of the thoughts that are reinforcing a negative self-concept that is then contributing to some of these challenging time management behaviors. So what we're doing here is to invite the absolute most kindness when it comes to navigating your time management, when it comes to deciding what goes on your calendar and what does not. So if your instinct is to unleash your inner critic and move forward, you'll need to change your approach. Instead of using that internal self-dialogue with phrases including get on with it, suck it up, just do it. If you were smarter, better, etc., you would have finished it by now. I would invite you to start using language that is much more supportive. So some language that you might adopt when you're thinking about your self-confidence and how it relates to your time management. You might say something like, it makes sense that it feels scary. You haven't done it before. Don't worry, you can figure this out. You might tell yourself, you're great at solving puzzles and this project is just a big puzzle. It may be something like you're the perfect person for the job, or you can turn that into a question. You can ask yourself, how am I the perfect person for this job? You might also imagine what would happen. Let's say that you do go to that worst case scenario. Let's say that you make a decision. It turns out to be unfavorable. You have a client or a colleague who then challenges you, who is not happy with you. You might imagine from that place of kindness how you would go about treating yourself in relation to that decision, and also how you would go about managing that particular challenge. So here the objective is simply to imagine how you are going to treat yourself and to treat yourself with kindness and to imagine how you can move forward regardless of the different potential outcomes from whatever it is that you are about to do. Now, step 4 is to take tiny steps. If this practice is new to you, if the idea of attaching the real steps you're taking in terms of time management to your levels of confidence and self-confidence, then you do not want to set yourself up for failure by trying to change everything all at once. The best way to approach this is to take tiny steps. So, for example, you might want to say no to something very small, a small invitation, maybe somebody who you don't know very well, and then see what happens. If it's decision making, you might want to make a decision on a particular matter, whether it's something to do with your career, whether it's related to a file, and then see what happens. If it involves overcommitting, you may want to start clearing some items from your calendar that are not essential and see what happens. The idea here is to simply start taking actions that reinforce the self-concept of somebody who is confident, who is being intentional with how they are choosing to spend their time. Now, the 5th point that I'm going to invite you to consider is surrounding yourself with positive and supportive people. Now, as you go through this journey and as you're taking tiny steps and testing out what this is like, you may find that it's challenging. It doesn't feel comfortable to you. And so I would invite you, to the extent possible, to surround yourself with people who support you. And I invite you to surround yourself with those people who are going to help you build your confidence in relation to setting boundaries in your calendar. What you might find is that you get pushback. You try to set a boundary and people try to pull you back. Maybe it's a social invitation and you find yourself having additional pressure. They want you to attend a particular event. You don't want to do it. And they maybe try to persuade you using guilt or other persuasion tactics. And you may need to hold fast to your decision not to do something. And so if you can surround yourself with people who support you in your goals, it'll simply make it easier for you to follow through to them. So the 5 steps that I have offered to you to help to build your confidence as it relates to your time management is number 1, to raise your awareness of the challenges that you're having on the ground when it comes to time management that may be rooted in your confidence levels. The second step is to understand how your confidence levels relate to that particular challenge. The third is to treat yourself with utmost confidence as you move forward. The fourth step is to start with tiny, tiny steps, one step at a time, to move in the direction of where you want to be, where you imagine yourself being in your time management practices if you were fully confident in yourself. The fifth step is to surround yourself with supportive people whose support for you aligns with the goal that you have for yourself. And another thing I wanted to mention here, when it comes to building self-confidence, I have recorded a number of podcast episodes that relate specifically to confidence. And so if this is an area where you feel like you could use some additional support, I invite you to listen to those podcast episodes, and you can find them by scrolling through the titles. You can also find those episodes. We'll link to them in the show notes. So why this will work. When you focus on building your self-confidence, what will happen is really a ripple effect. You will feel more at ease following through on traditional time management strategies, such as choosing priorities, saying no to opportunities that don't align. You will feel more decisive, and you will stop apologizing for not being everywhere at once. You may find that you're procrastinating less because you actually want to do the things that are on your calendar, and you feel confident about your ability to do them. You may also realize that you don't have to say yes to everything. As you increasingly curate your calendar, you'll start to love the way that it looks, and that will reinforce the trust that you have in yourself along with your levels of confidence. Now, the skills that are required to do this work are simple, but they're not necessarily easy. First of all, you may need to give yourself permission to not be the person that does everything that is there in all places at all times. You may need to give yourself permission to say no to things. You may need to give yourself permission to make decisions and take risks that feel scary and may not be popular. That may be your starting point. Other skills you will need to use your observation skills. You will need to become a curious observer of yourself, to notice where you are having challenges where it comes to time management. You may also need to exercise curiosity about how you speak to yourself. Are you using the voice of the inner drill sergeant, the inner critic, or are you using that voice of the inner guide, the inner mentor, your benevolent future self? Whose voice are you hearing in your head as you go through this process? And you will need to develop the skill of trust. That means trusting yourself and trusting that you are the best judge of what is right for you. And when it comes to what the right decisions are for you, there is no right or wrong decision. And there is no authority out there other than you who is there to tell you how to spend your time, who knows better than you about how you can spend your time, or who's there to punish you for the way that you spend your time. And as I was preparing for today's podcast episode, I was thinking about sunny days, and I kind of coined it the sunny day syndrome. Maybe you can relate to this. When I was growing up, if it was sunny outside, I was always encouraged to go out and play, right? Nobody wants to waste a so-called sunny day. This was at home, this was at school. And so to this day, at 46 years old, whenever there's a sunny day, I feel this compelling, impending pressure that I need to get outside because I don't want to waste a sunny day. Even this time of year, it's actually pretty sunny in Vancouver at this moment. The truly sunny days are too hot for me, but I still find I make it out either in the morning or in the evening because I don't want to waste them. And yet, when I think about it, there is no sunny day police that's going to come by and say, Paula, you did not spend enough time outside in the sun today. And the same is true of all of those items on your to-do list. Yes, some of those items on your to-do list are job requirements. Yes, you must do those things if you want to fulfill your job requirements. But there are items on your calendar that are not requirements of your job. These are not things that must be on your calendar. And so again, I invite you to think about you choosing what goes on there based on what aligns with you and having the confidence to make those decisions. Now, when you do this work, what you will find is your confidence will build. And as you practice exercising your new skills when it comes to discerning what you choose and what you choose not to do, what you will create is a curated calendar that contains more of what you love to do. You will find that you're able to make decisions faster and you will then move faster. And as you increasingly do that, you will trust your own judgment. You will spend less time feeling dread about what's on your calendar and pushing things off into the future. And you will spend more time in moving forward and engage in being creative about what else you can do in the future. You'll let go of rumination and you'll be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You'll spend less time making up for the lost time that was caused by procrastination. And finally, you'll stop worrying so much about what other people think, and instead you'll be able to channel that inner sense of confidence. So, my dear friends, just to sum it up, I'm going to go back to those 5 examples where time management and confidence can create challenges. Those challenges were overscheduling, procrastination, tasks taking longer, rumination and second guessing, and wasting time. Those were some of the challenges that I see in my practice, and the tools that I offered to help you to build your confidence and to overcome some of those challenges are: number 1, creating awareness of the challenges that resonate most strongly with you. Number 2 was to gain a better understanding of how confidence relates to those particular time management challenges. What is it that you're really afraid of? The third is to treat yourself with the utmost kindness in the way that you speak to yourself as you move forward. The next was to take tiny steps, start small. Number 5 was to surround yourself with supportive people. And I also offered that I have a number of podcast episodes relating to self-confidence. Also, I have a number of episodes relating to time management. So you can think about these 2 different topics in relationship to each other. It has been such a pleasure to connect with you this week. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, please do reach out. If you enjoy this podcast episode, please do give it a rating and a review wherever it is that you download your podcast. I would really, really love that. And it will help to share news of this podcast among like-minded lawyers like you who would potentially benefit from listening to this podcast. So with that being said, I thank you again for joining me here today, for using your time to learn about this new perspective on managing your time. And I very much hope to connect with you again next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.